Okay, video is going to be part 11 from this book right here, Prevent and Reverse Hypertension by me, Pete Rogers. We're on figure 122, first chapter. And this is a drawing of caloric density. Basically, if you want to lose weight, you want to eat lower caloric density. That's one of the first things you can do. Like eat your veggies first, as Chef AJ used to say, as Dr. McDougall would say, the more veggies you eat, the skinnier you'll be. Other people will say the more fiber you eat, the skinnier you will be. These foods are low in caloric density, veggies in particular. They've only got 1.1 calorie per gram. Okay, so what that means is it stretches your stomach, and that causes early satisfaction of hunger. You can't eat more than 50% veggies or you'll get sick, but you can eat a lot of veggies. I mean, McDougall would usually tell people just eat 90% starch, 5% veggies, 5% fruits. And a lot of his patients were older and they were sick. That was just a way to get better fast before you and then spend more time learning about it. But that would be what he'd usually recommend. I'll probably eat more in the ballpark of about 60% of calories from starch and about 35% of calories from fruits and 5% from veggies. Okay. If you're trying to lose weight, though, up the veggies. And Chef AJ would emphasize, start by eating your veggies. That'll help you to stretch your stomach with very few calories, get early satisfaction of hunger. Okay. And if you don't eat the veggies first, you'll have a tendency at the end of the meal to just eat a little bit of veggies and you've already stuffed yourself. And much better to start with the veggies if you're trying to lose weight. Okay, the worst food is the oil. Oil is the highest caloric density of all foods. Okay, it's at 9 calories per gram. That's why I think all these suggestions of, eating olive oil or drinking olive oil are frankly idiotic, okay? There's a lot of money in it, okay? When something is a big profit, there's some people who are literally being paid over $1 million a year to promote olive oil. And think about it, if you're a food company, you pay some well-known physician, get them onto the right committees, they can get your olive oil or whatever else, whatever food, whatever corporate product you want approved. Okay, that's why you got all these people on the internet saying, oh, coffee is good for you. Yeah, right. It's all nonsense, okay? Anyway, so oil is the absolute worst. Nuts and seeds are quite bad, though. I want you to see this. Look at this. 6 calories per gram. That is really high caloric density. Nuts and seeds are in the ballpark 70 to 90% of calories from fat. You don't want that. Okay, what about meats? Meats and sweets, they tend to be about 4 calories per gram. So, pure sugar is in the ballpark of pure carbohydrate, about 4 calories per gram. The meat got a lot of fat in it. It's going to be in the ballpark of 4 calories per gram. When you talk about a starch is much lower caloric density. It's only 25% of the caloric density at 1 calories per gram. And the reason is because it's all that fiber. Starch is like a polymer of glucose wrapped in fiber. And all that fiber makes it much lower in caloric density. And that also stretches the stomach, providing early satisfaction of hunger. Okay? So the classic, starches are things like rice, beans, potatoes, sweet potatoes, quinoa, oatmeal, whole grains. Okay, fruits are similar. Fruits are also in the ballpark of being about 1 calorie per gram. So that's good to know if you want to lose weight. And the fruits are loaded with potassium. Starches are good for potassium. Fruits are loaded with potassium. So you're going to have a high K factor, meaning a high ratio of potassium to sodium, and that also helps you to lose weight. Okay? And processed foods are a disaster. I talked about processed foods. Why are processed foods so bad? Remember how we spoke about where are ions located? You have to know this. If you remember this, it's going to help you all the rest of your life to understand tons of things. Think of the ocean as the extracellular space. God invented life in the ocean, in the saltwater ocean. So the water itself is high in salt, sodium chloride. Remember the sodium is high. And it's high in calcium because the water rinses against the rocks at the side of the water, the limestone, the calcium carbonate, and it rinses calcium into the seawater. And you need to know that because when God first formed the first cell, the first life, in order for that cell to live, it had to pump out the sodium and the calcium in order that it could have other things inside itself. It can't just keep them there and add stuff because then its osmolality would be too high. Water follows osmolality. They would come into the cell and make it burst. Okay, so it's always this way. The extracellular space is high in sodium and it is high in calcium. The intracellular space is high in potassium and magnesium. You need to know that. Potassium and magnesium are the intracellular, inside the cell ions. Okay, why does that matter? Because when you take a processed food, they take the food and they smush it and, breaking apart the cells, they rinse it with solvents like water and other things. And they rinse away the potassium and the magnesium. Then they add back salt, the sodium, because it tastes good and it's a preservative. So that's why processed foods, they're always going to be high, almost always going to be high in sodium and very, very low in potassium and magnesium. And that's like a perfect recipe for hypertension. They have a below 1 K factor quite often, okay? You want these high K factors. Fruits, they got K factors 100 to 400, okay? Starches 20 to 100, they're high, the K factors, and that prevents hypertension, okay? Here's also just a diagram showing what's going on with starches. And I can tell you, like I said, I've been a doctor for over 30 years. I'm board certified in 3 fields. The most important thing I ever learned in all these years, over 30 years of studying health and medicine, is that humans should eat starch. And the reason I say that is McDougall figured this out, and that's why he's the greatest doctor of all time. If you just eat the starches, he said, eat 90% of your calories from starch. You don't have to know anything else. Just eat 90% of your calories from starch, and then give 5% for fruits and veggies. Just do that, and you'll avoid almost all the chronic diseases. And then they'll say, well, why so much starch? Why do you make it that way? Why not 90% fruits? McDougall will tell you just because there's no fruitarian populations in the wild. He says all these traditional populations, they ate about that. They ate about 90% starch, 5% fruits, and 5% veggies. In that ballpark. He says they were all predominantly starch-based populations. In the wild, people do eat a little bit of meat, and that would help you get some B12. Most Americans, though, and Western world people, they ate more of these high-fat diets, standard American diets, high-fat Western Mediterranean diets and whatnot. And so they've got to detox themselves, in a sense, from all the fat in their bodies, the atherosclerosis, the diabetes, the hypertension, the obesity. So it's better to become 100% vegan. Also, it's hard to just do a little bit of something. And it's easy to take methylcobalamin. I wouldn't take cyanocobalamin. I take methylcobalamin. And that'll give you the path to the best health you can get. Okay, so typical starches, rice, beans, potatoes, sweet potatoes, quinoa, oatmeal, peas. Examples of beans are things like lentils. I like lentils because they're only 3% of calories from fat. Black beans are about 4% of calories from fat, which is pretty good. Garbanzos are getting a little fatter. So if you're too skinny, you can eat more garbanzos. They're about 13% of calories from fat, which is not bad. I think soybeans are really bad, 37 to 40% of calories from fat. Bad, bad, bad. Flax seeds, 60% of calories from fat. Disaster. I would recommend never eat flax. I'd recommend never eat soy. I think soy is one of the most overrated things around. I've given previous lectures on that before. But anyway, here's the point about starches. They're very low caloric density, only 1 calorie per gram. They're primarily, a polymer glucose wrapped in fiber. It takes time for the intestinal enzymes to peel the fiber away from the glucose, so you get this slow absorption of glucose into the blood. So your blood glucose comes up gradually. You get this prolonged nice blood glucose level, all right? If you eat simple sugars, you have a tendency to spike your blood glucose too rapidly. The pancreas tends to overcompensate, release too much insulin, drive your blood glucose down too rapidly. And then you feel lousy, you get this sudden rebound hypoglycemia. Hypo means low, so hypoglycemia means too low of a blood sugar. And then you want to grab some more sugars, sweets, to get your sugar back up fast, and you end up with a roller coaster blood glucose curve. That's bad for your, for gaining weight, for increasing the risk of fatty liver, for increasing the risk of atrial fibrillation, for causing other problems, including weight gain. And by the way, I think the sugar diet's totally overrated idea, and you don't want to rot your teeth. That can be a problem. Okay, so anyways, that's the scoop on starches. They give you, they have the effect of being like a slow release energy pill that keeps you in the zone of normal blood glucose a prolonged amount of time, and that makes you healthy. Okay, and that'll be it for today in this lecture from the book Prevent and Reverse Hypertension. Hope you found that helpful.